Yes, this is now tarot lesson 146, and I'm just going to start, even though I might kind of backtrack as we go through this. I want to do two things today, and it's because I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos about the tarot, and there's quite a lot about the tarot and Jung, and I want to get to that, but also a lot of people talk about using the tarot for self-development, and I don't think you can. This whole series began, I don't know when, a while ago, and it's called the Tarot for Self-Education. And I think you can use, it may not seem to be that much different from self-education, self-development, but I think it is, because it's one thing to educate yourself and then see how what you learn can be applied to the tarot, or how the tarot can expand on an idea that you discovered in your studies or in your reading or in your conversation with people. But I don't think it's the same as self-development, and I'll get to why in a bit. First, though, Carl Jung. I've got my notes. My problem with Jung is that Jungian psychology is a closed system, because you've got four types: sensation, intuition, feeling, and I can't remember the fourth one. But it's like they begin with a closed system with four types and all the rest of it, and the self is a particular definition, and they've got a particular meaning for the personal unconscious and the collective unconscious. You've got all these technical terms, and somehow we're supposed to fit in with their preconceived idea. And so it seems to me that Jung is a closed system, but the tarot is kind of organic, and it's everywhere all at once. And I don't think you get that with Jungian psychology or with any kind of psychology. Let me show you this. So I wanted to use Carl Jung's horoscope, but there's a doubt about, he was born at sunset, and when exactly is sunset? It's a period of time. So I went to Astro Data Bank, and they've got a chart for Jung with 1 degree of Aquarius rising, which puts 1 Leo on the 7th house cusp, right? So this first house is the house of the self, right? And the 7th is the house of other people. So Aquarius is ruled by Saturn, and Jung happens to have Saturn in the first house, in the house of self. This means, and don't use whole sign houses, but 1 Aquarius rising and Saturn in the first house, this means that Jung himself was self-contained. Some people, if Jung had the rule of, with Aquarius rising, if he had Saturn in the 10th house, he would want to appear before the public in some way. If Saturn were in the 9th, he would marry a foreigner, but he would also travel and be an academic, that kind of thing. But because he's got Saturn, he's got Aquarius rising probably, and Saturn in the first house, he's self-contained. And his big thing, one of his big things, was the process of individuation. It was really important for Jung to be himself, to discover himself, to focus on himself. Whereas it's probably not true for you or for me. We've got different starting points when it comes to understanding and developing the self. It works for Jung because he was himself. But the other point to notice is we've got Leo in the 7th house, of course, describing the other people in his life. He's got the sun in Leo in the 7th house. So the other people in his life, the ruler of the 7th in the 7th, the other people in his life are self-contained as well. Whereas you probably don't associate that much with people who are also self-contained, like Jung's people. So Jung is fine if you're Carl Jung. I just don't see how you can easily and correctly apply his teachings or his ideas, which are work for him, but they don't work for other people. And so it sounds good, and it is good, and it's interesting, but I have a problem when people try to fit everybody and fit you and me into his method, into his system. And an example that I got here, somebody else, is Clint Eastwood. I want you to try and find somebody reasonably well known. And Clint Eastwood, again, a timed birth, so he's got 18 Scorpio rising, and that's Clint, and it's intense and daring from Scorpio rising. You know what it's like, his Dirty Harry character. Okay, so he can play that and it works because he's kind of like that. So Scorpio is ruled by Mars, and I have to look here to the notes that I made. Okay, he's got Mars in the 6th house at 28 degrees of Aries. So Jung has got the rule of the first in the first. He is himself. Clint wants to be of service to other people because it's in the 6th house, the house of service. Also, he's got Mars in Aries. Mars, the ruler of the self, is in Aries. He wants to do things that have never been done before. He's a pioneer because Aries is a pioneer. Aries is also the child of the zodiac, so he's a bit of a baby in his own way. Okay, so this happens to be the Sagittarius decanate, the Pisces decanate, ruled by Jupiter. And he's got Jupiter in the 8th at, let me look here, 24 Gemini. So Clint himself, because we're looking at the self, he wants to be of service to other people because he's got the rule of the first and the 6th. He also studies other people's values and other people's opinions because the rule of the first is in the 8th, which is the house of other people's values. It's also the house of death, which we can maybe consider Dirty Harry and his movies that he's made about, lots of movies about killing, but Clint specializes in that kind of thing. So when you look at Clint himself, his whole being, his whole development is in 6th and 8th house matters, which is not the same as Carl Jung, because Carl's big thing, his development of himself is about himself. It doesn't go to other areas of the horoscope. It doesn't go to other areas of life. So he's not particularly interested in partnerships. And he was an associate of Freud, but they split. And so he's not particularly interested in coming before the public, or he's not particularly interested in communicating because he doesn't have a ruler of the first and the third. So I think I'd like to make the point. So Jung is fine, but I don't see how you can take Jung's ideas and apply them to everybody else, which is what people do. So, because it's a tarot video, I thought at this point we would look and see. So, if maybe I would ask, what's Jungian psychology good for when it comes to the tarot? So, I don't know what I'm going to get here. What's it good for? That card, the Page of Swords. What did we say about that? It's good for looking back, because the person here is looking in that direction. They've got a sword in one hand, so they're sort of protecting their front, but they're looking back. So Jungian psychology is good for looking back, for understanding why people behave the way they behave. There's also a sword in the Justice card, but we didn't get the Justice card. We got the pages, and maybe the because it's a page and pages represent young people. Maybe Jungian psychology is good as a starting point for a beginning, or baby steps, or If you're just new into psychology, let's say, Jung is good at the beginning, but what does it lead to? The 8 buttons, it leads to expansion and development. And so it has its value. I'm getting kind of stuck here, but I think I wanted to show you the idea of Jung here being self-contained and the other people in his life being self-contained as well. Whereas you're probably not. Maybe you are, but most people aren't, and most people don't deal with self-contained people. So that was, I don't know how convincing that was, but we can come back to it later. And I think it's all about, or it's to some extent about learning a bit each time we go and developing understanding a little bit here and a little bit there. And then we can make connections as we go along. Because the other thing is, people talk about, I need to put this away here. People talk about the tarot for self-development. And so I watched this video on the Fool's Journey. And so usually with the Fool's Journey, you begin with the Fool, right? That you start with the Fool, and the Fool represents potential. And the other thing is, with the Fool, it's number 0. And people talk about how, need a piece of paper here. People talk about the Fool representing potential, and it's nothing, and then the Fool goes on a journey and meets the magician and so on, which is fair enough. That's one way of doing it. The only thing is, Fibonacci was this Italian mathematician about 1200, and he developed he's well known for the Fibonacci series. And so you've got the Fibonacci series is where you take one number and add the previous number and get a new number. So if you look at the Fibonacci series, it usually begins 0, 1, 1, and 0 and 1 is 1. 1 and 1 is 2. 2 and 1 is 3. 3 and 2 is 5. 5 and 3 is 8. 8 and 5 is 13. 13 and 8 is 21. And that's as far as I'll go because there's 21 major trumps. So people usually, because Fibonacci began with 1 and a second 1, they added a 0 at the beginning. So it's a bit like you've got nothing, and then suddenly you've got something. Where did that something come from? And I find this 0 and 1, in the beginning there was nothing, and then suddenly you've got something. What was the something? Where did it come from? And where was it before it was something? And that might sound like a ridiculous question, but I think it's valid. So the thing about Fibonacci is his system or his method was 1, 1, 2. Oh, sorry. When he introduced the idea of 0 or the number 0 from Arab mathematicians, Indian mathematicians. But the thing is, he went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. He didn't begin with 0. If you look at Roman numerals, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's no 0. So Fibonacci used 0 after 9, not at the beginning. And so this tells us, I think, that with Fibonacci, who's maybe talking about life and where it comes from, you begin with 1, and then you've got a second 1. So you've got 1, which is unity, and 1 represents everything. So instead of beginning with nothing, and suddenly you've got something, instead you begin with everything. 1, unity and wholeness. You begin with everything. The second 1 is the reflection of the original. It's not, it looks like the original because it's a reflection, and it's 1 and 1. And this is where we live, in this second 1. This is a life. So life is a reflection of an original wholeness of everything. But we're not in the original. We are living in the reflection. This can be Buddhist, everything is Maya, everything is illusion. But I think it's interesting that instead of this idea that you don't start with from nothing, you begin with something and you reflect it, and that gets you in the whole sequence. So this can be why the self, Jung's self, is Aquarius rising and Saturn in the first, whereas Clint Eastwood's self, he doesn't begin with as nothing, and suddenly he's like an empty vessel and you get to fill it. Or his parents filled Clint with stuff. You, and you've got a rising sign. If you don't know your time of birth, ask anybody who might know and at least get an idea of whether you were born in the morning, the afternoon, or the evening, or the middle of the night. Because somebody might know that you were born. Yes, I wasn't there when you were born, but they called me at 6 o'clock and I was about to leave for work, and told me you'd been born. So you know that you were born maybe 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. And that's a starting point for coming up with the horoscope. Because when you know what your rising sign is, you know what the 7th house cusp is, you get an understanding of your path in life. So Clint is meant to go from Scorpio, which is I desire, to Taurus, which is I have. And that's his particular path in life. So to go back to numbers here, so it's not like we begin with nothing and we become something. We begin with something and we reflect it, and that gives us the whole path. And the reason I'm going on like this is partly because I think it's interesting, but also the full, instead of, let me just cover this mark here, instead of the full, I took these cards out. The full comes after 9, and it comes before 10. Oh, the Wheel of Fortune is here. What does that tell us about the Fool's journey? Because all these videos on the Tarot for Self-Development begin with the Fool is nothing, and then you go through one, the Magician, the High Priestess, and so on. And they give you this whole story about how the Fool develops. Maybe they're all wrong, or they're misleading in their own way. And really we ought to begin with the Fool between 9 and 10. So the Fool happens to be looking back to 9, looking in this direction. So maybe if you're going to do the Fool's journey or understand yourself and develop yourself, you begin with the Fool. Okay, let's begin with the Fool. But step 1 is the Hermit. You begin with knowledge and wisdom, and you're on your own, as we all are when we're born. I mean, we've got mothers and parents and so on, but in the end, it's you. And you've got to learn your own lessons, and nobody can learn them for you. And maybe that's the point of the Fool's journey. Step number 1 is be that you're a hermit, and you're on your own. And so the life is about learning wisdom and about finding your star, finding your guiding light, rather than the Magician, which is like knowledge and ideas and imagination, if I can find it in here. You know what the Magician is. Maybe that's not step 1. Maybe the Magician's step 8 or 9. So we've got the Fool is 0 here. And step 1 is to go find the Magician, or find the Hermit, and find your own inner hermit, your own inner wisdom. And that's what life is about. Not being imaginative and creative from the Magician, but being or finding your own inner guidance. But it's your own inner guidance, not somebody else's guidance. You can take other people's ideas, but you need to do something and make them your own, rather than learn somebody else's method or somebody else's answers. You listen to what other people's answers are, but you need to incorporate them into your own way of living, because your way of living is not the rule of the first and the first. Your way of living is more likely to be spread all over the place with signs and decanates, which gives you meanings and sub-meanings and paths and variations and branches of the path. And it's very particular, because you can go into this, it's wheels within wheels. You can go into it in great detail. So maybe the fool's journey really begins with the magician, or the hermit. Or, I'm saying this because the fool's looking this way, maybe when the fool is upside down, it's the fool not being aware of himself, or not being aware of the need for being true to your own self. That's when you deal with the Wheel of Fortune. That's when you enter. If you're not paying attention to your own inner self, you get stuck in the Wheel of Fortune. You get stuck, and you become on the receiving end of fortune, because fortune can be good fortune or bad fortune. And so maybe it's the fool reversed who goes this way, and you're in the world of fortune, and it can be good and you're lucky, or it can be bad and you have one misfortune, one problem or one difficulty after the other. And then with the Wheel of Fortune, it's followed by strength, and with the hermit's followed by, again, we get 8 and 11 are kind of different, but and weight changed them. So strength is really 11. And so with the Fool reversed, you go to the Wheel of Fortune, then the strength card, and you have to develop strength. So you're kind of developing inner strength with this one, only instead of doing it directly here and understanding the value of self-awareness and self-understanding, here you end up developing yourself because you've had problems. So your motivation is different if you go this way than if you go this way. So that's my argument against using the tarot for self-development, the way people talk about it in videos. That's today's ramblings from me. So thanks for watching. If you have comments or questions, let me know. Dementia, sorry, I didn't get to what you wanted to do or what you talked about. I'll do it next time, because it deserves its own video, or the concerns, the kind of things you're talking about, I think need a bit of thought and a bit of background, and we can do something with it. So next time, I'll get to that. So, and Talis, while I remember, you left a comment a while ago about thought, about memory. I think it was memory, and I meant to leave a follow-up and explain a little bit more. So maybe if you see this, you could explain a little bit more about what you wanted to know about with your comment from maybe 4 videos ago. Okay, thanks for watching, and have a good day. Okay, bye-bye.